A very good evening to each and every one of you. Each and every one of you. Welcome in the ring. Folks, let's fight. I know some of you were a little bit worried that we weren't coming on this evening. But sometimes you have to give yourself to people in doses. Keep them wanting more, keep them hanging on for a bit more. So it's good to see each and every one of you tonight. Folks, don't let's waste time. As soon as we come, let us share the live stream, let us retweet, let us subscribe on YouTube. It's Sherry Duncan on YouTube, it's Sherry Avery Duncan on Twitter, and we're across social media. We're on my Facebook page, we're on the Apto AFC's Facebook page, we're on AFC's Facebook page, we're on my profile, we're on my page, we are in the AFC group, we're streaming right across all our platforms and social media. And I'm going to wait until I have some more of you because I am ready to get in to round one, folks. Hot topics. I'm ready to go. We have quite a program lined up for you this evening, and we really crave your attention. We crave your attention, guys. We crave your attention. And I see so many of you are signing on, are logging on, tuning in, and I hope you guys had a great day. Whether you are at work or you stayed home or you were between work and home, you were working from home, I trust you had a great day and that it was a productive day above all else. Folks, we have so much to live for, so much to be thankful for. Just recently, the United States of America surpassed 400,000 dead from COVID. But you and I have life tonight, and I believe that is enough to be grateful for. You might not have all the money in the world, you might not have all the food in the world, your data might be on your last 100 MB, what have you, but you have life. And because you have life, there is so much to hope for, folks. There is so much to hope for. While you might be seeing us with some very small numbers on the page or on Twitter or on YouTube, we are seeing the amalgamation of all our stream from our end and the amount of persons who are viewing. So I'm looking for a magic number at my end, and then we are going to start, folks. We want to get to round one. We want to fight tonight. I am ready to fight. I came to fight. I came prepared to fight. I've been in training, ready to have a go, folks. Ready to have a go at it. And again, I was a couple minutes late because I was having a wardrobe malfunction. And guys, I don't take your time lightly, and I want to be looking sharp when I come on just for you guys, because that is how we do things here in the ring, and that is how we do things on this side of the house, on this side of the aisle, folks. And so we want to get right to it this evening. And you know how we do round one. I know lots of you wait with bated breath to see what we're going to discuss. And who am I to disappoint you guys, huh? Who am I? I'm not going to disappoint you one bit. So do we have the folks ready? Are you guys ready? All right, folks, let's get to work. Let's go. And first up this evening, we want to talk about the COVID cash grant. And there is a lot of headache where this COVID cash grant is concerned. Lots of people on the East Coast, for instance, have been complaining that irrespective of whether they have their own homes or whether they are renting, the COVID cash grant team, they're finding some way to deny them giving them this money. And as we've been saying on this show, even on the East Bank, this has been happening. And as we've been saying on this program, in some communities, the COVID cash grant team take a bottom house, they take a shop, they take some means of distributing this money to folks as against going house to house. So they choose a central location in some communities, and people go to them. They don't want to see in your pot. They don't want to see under your bed. They give them the 25,000, whether it's every member of the family or it's per household. And then some other communities, we see some other things obtaining. But why we raise this issue? Because even in these communities where they're giving, in some instances, as I've said, 25,000 per person in household, or 25,000 per household, even though those persons do not own those homes, and they are denying other persons in other communities on the same basis. Persons have been speaking out who are recipient of the COVID cash grant. And just today, we spoke with one such person who is renting and received the COVID cash grant. This is a person of Indian ancestry, and we have so many complaints of persons of African ancestry who say that when the COVID cash grant team go to their home and they are renting, like this other person here, they cannot receive the COVID cash grant. And so even people who are in receipt of the COVID cash grant, and they are complaining. Again, folks, this is a situation that we are monitoring very closely, and we are going to keep reporting on it, not only at forums like this, but also at the parliamentary level. We're going to engage the government on why there are these discriminatory practices occurring in the distribution of the COVID cash grant. Folks, God is a Guyanese. God is Guyanese. And I'll tell you why. Just today, there was an accident on the East Bank of 𝗪𝗪 involving traffic rank Constable Roy Shanks. And that is Constable Roy Shanks on the roadway. Apparently and allegedly, he was hit by a sand truck. But thanks be to God that God is a Guyanese. Traffic rank Constable Roy Shanks is in stable condition, we are advised, and is receiving much needed medical attention. And our thoughts and our prayers, of course, go out to the Guyana Police Force and their colleague, especially this traffic rank Constable Roy Shanks. Folks, God is a Guyanese. With the amount of things that go on in this country, it's a miracle we are alive. It is nothing short of a miracle that all of us are alive. And I'll tell you some more about that. So again, folks, hit this morning by this sand truck and lying in the roadway, as our photograph shows you there, is traffic rank Constable Roy Shanks. And so again, our thoughts and our prayers are with him. Let's turn our attention now to another issue. As you guys know, in the news recently is the fact that is a story rather than fact. It's a story that former Minister of Public Infrastructure, now Public Works, David Patterson, received several gifts while he was in office, including a gold band. He has recently denied those allegations, especially as it regards to this particular gold band that was said to have been bought from the asphalt plant associated with the 𝗪𝗪 Harbor Bridge. He said he has never been in receipt of any such gold band, and the gold band that he wears currently is a family heirloom. And he went on to say that the receiving gifts rather as a minister was nothing new, and that it has been a feature of every administration. The current Minister of Public Works seemed not to take that very lightly and has been preaching rather a very lengthy sermon for a number of days on the subject matter. And now questions are being asked of the Right Honorable Bishop where he's getting his gold from, because the bishop can be seen many times sporting a lot of gold jewelry. So the questions are now being turned back to the bishop as to where he is getting his gold supply from, whether it is Mohammed's or any other source in the country. Where is he getting his gold supply from? And not to be outdone, just recently, the Honorable Minister, 𝗪𝗪, the good Bishop 𝗪𝗪, was photographed with the Ambassador George Mussad from Madrid, Spain, apparently receiving gifts. This wasn't prior to 2015. This was about 2 days ago, if so long. Pictured here in the office, in his office, Ministry of Public Works, receiving gifts from Ambassador George Mussad from Madrid, Spain. So why is the minister then making an issue of other ministers in the previous government receiving gifts one way or the other? Underline gifts in bold. And so again, this is the Minister 𝗪𝗪 just recently seeming to receive a number of gifts here from this representative, or rather Ambassador George Mussad from Madrid, Spain. And not to be outdone, as soon as the minister came to office, there are photographs on their the Ministry of Public Works Facebook page where the minister met with one J-man Shaw and 𝗫𝗏 𝗵𝗴. And these are just some of the photographs that are in circulation and seemingly to be receiving gifts again. And as you see there, one of the photographs show these two individuals, J-man Shaw and 𝗫𝗏 𝗵𝗴, showering a gift on the minister. Folks, but I would have you know that since this story broke about gifts being received by ministers, several of these photographs have been taken down from the Ministry of Public Works Facebook page and website. And so the minister seems to be covering his tracks in terms of receiving gifts. And so, Bishop, judge not, lest you be judged. Folks, I started the program this evening by saying to you that God is a Guyanese, and God must be a Guyanese, because this was the scene just today, just recently, rather, I think this was yesterday, at the Ministry of Housing. COVID where? COVID where? This was the scene in front of the Ministry of Housing, or rather the Central Housing and Planning Authority, which is within the Ministry of Housing. Folks, this was the scene there. No social distancing, a few persons wearing masks. You know, you're not supposed to be assembling publicly in groups larger than 10. Of course, this is a government that has continually and continuously broke its own COVID-19 regulations, its own COVID-19 policies. And this is just another demonstration. And so, folks, I know everybody deserves a piece of land. Every Guyanese deserves a piece of land, but it is not worth your life. COVID is real. Just ask the Americans, who have just surpassed 400,000 dead. Thankfully, Guyana is still in the triple digits. We are at, I think, just at 170 or just above that. And so, shame on the Minister of Housing, shame of the minister within the Ministry of Housing for having people congregate and meet like this in a national, during a pandemic of historic proportion and as deadly as COVID is and its strain. Turning your attention now to Mr. Lennox Schumann, the other Judas, or as I call him, Shu-das. The other Judas, or as I call him, Shu-das. Folks, the Lennox Schumann recently commented on the Jimmy James issue. And as you know, the issue of Jimmy James is one that we have been raising on this program for quite a few evenings now. And Jimmy James is the RDC designated councillor, the regional Democratic councillor from region number 8. And between Schumann's party, the Liberty and Justice Party, and the PPPC, they have been working overtime to deny Mr. Jimmy James that seat on the council. Never mind, it has already been gazetted. And all they're waiting for now is to constitute the committee. They have been delaying constituting committee because they do not want Jimmy James to side with, to listen to the APNU AFC in any way. As a matter of fact, quite recently, we told you that Mr. James was said to be sick, and no longer interested in being a councillor, Well, just this evening, News Source put out an article where the Liberty and Justice Party is now disowning Mr. Jimmy James by saying that it no longer has confidence in Mr. James. So it's no longer that he is sick. It's no longer that he's not interested in serving as a councillor for Region 8. It is now that they have lost confidence in him. According to this report by News Source, James served as the regional candidate for the party in the last elections and was submitted by the party as its representative for the Region 8 Democratic Council. However, the council still is to be sworn in, and the LJP has been making moves to recall the nomination. 𝗁𝗵 has not been responding to its request. So, folks, what a shame. What a shame. What a shame Mr. 𝗁𝗵 is. What a shame. Round two, folks. Round two. A good night to all except. A good night to all except. Well, of course, you know, I want to see what some of the suggestions are. I want to see what some of the suggestions are going to be, folks. Of course, I want to see that. So I'm going to put up a few of them. Let us go through them, and then we get a sense of where do we go from here. And I know some of you are going to get it right. A good night to all except. Alexis Williams says, 𝗁𝗵. A good night to all except. And Josiah says, 𝗁𝗧. A good night to all except. Lita Basdio says, 𝗁𝗵. I'm taking some of the other comments. Karen Black says, the bishop. Karen Black says, the bishop. And we have many other comments this evening. Many other comments this evening. Folks, do we have the drum roll? Do we have the drum roll, folks? Do we have the drum roll? A good night to all except. I'm not hearing those drum rolls. Y'all don't listen to instructions, you know. I want to hear the drum rolls. Fairly okay. Folks, as we wait, share the live stream, retweet, subscribe. A good night to all except. Yeah, you got it right. A good night to all except Lennox 𝗁𝗵. A good night to all except Lennox 𝗁𝗵. This was the fella who on to nomination day did not declare and renounce his dual citizenship. On to nomination day did not renounce his dual citizenship, even though he knew because of that no confidence motion case with the other Judas, Judas the first. Shu-das knew he could not sit in the National Assembly as a dual citizen, or with dual citizenship. And even on to nomination day, he had not renounced his dual citizenship. He was hedging his bet. 1 foot in the pan, 1 foot out the pan. Hedging his bets. This was the same 𝗁𝗵, folks, who knew, Shu-das, who knew that the deputy speaker goes to the main opposition party. Same Shu-das who knew that the deputy speakership, which he now occupies, goes to the party with the second largest plurality of votes in the National Assembly. But again, conspiring with and siding with the PPP, 𝗁𝗵 accepted the nomination for deputy speaker. Same Shu-das. The other Judas. It is the same 𝗁𝗵 who should have been more vocal when the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs was renamed Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. 𝗁𝗵 didn't speak up. It's the same 𝗁𝗵, or rather Shu-das. Same person, Shu-das, Lennox Shu-das, who now sits also as a board member appointed by the PPP on the Civil Aviation Authority. Same Shu-das. This is his 30 pieces of silver And now he is harassing Jimmy James. He is harassing Jimmy James. Can you imagine that? He is harassing, right? Jimmy James. At first, they claimed that Jimmy was sick. They claimed he was no longer interested in serving as a counselor. These lying, treacherous, deceitful, conniving people, Shu-das and company. And this evening, coming out with a statement that they no longer have confidence in Jimmy. But it's the people of this country who no longer have confidence in Shu-das. It is the people of this country who no longer have any confidence in Shu-das. So it's not the other way around. It is the people who no longer have any confidence in Shu-das. So folks, it's a good night to all, except it is a good night to all except, and I am quite certain each and every one of you perhaps have your own story about Shu-das. So we say to him this evening, stop harassing Jimmy James and come straight with the truth. Stop harassing Jimmy James. Come straight with the truth. So a good night to all, except Shu-das. A good night to all folks, all of you wonderful, beautiful people. Even the fraudulent PVP supporters on these various social media platforms, making all the negative comments. A good night to all of you, except Shu-das. Except Shu-das. Except Shu-das. We're going to come back to him later on. We're going to come back to him a little later on, folks. And we go to round 3. Are you guys ready? Round 3. We have some folks who are joining us for the close-up segment. A good night to all, except fraudulent Schumann, deceitful Schumann, lying Schumann. A good night to all, except. And if they want to challenge anything I have said, all they got to do is step in the ring. That is all they got to do. Step in the ring. Folks, I'm going to be joined this evening by Member of Parliament 𝗁𝗁ci 𝗶𝗵𝗵, and I'm going to also be joined by Member of Parliament Christopher Jones. And we want to update you on some of the happenings in Parliament, and I'll give Jem a chance to tell you that. But of course, this segment brings us up close to the issues and up close to the personalities. While we hold for our guests to join us this evening, I'm going to require of you to share the live stream, share on Facebook, continue to bring your comments, retweet on Twitter, share, folks. We always say that is the price of admissions. I'm taking some of the comments. Oh, somebody sending some very, very charming words here, my Lord. Very, very charming words. Somebody says a good night. Do I have that? A good night to everyone. Bless God. A good night to all, except Shu-das. Except Shu-das. We thank all the persons who are joining us from the diaspora. We thank each and every one of you. And we welcome our colleague, 𝗁𝗁ci 𝗶𝗵𝗵, who is joining us. All right, some comments are getting a little interesting now. Ms. Finance, welcome.
Good evening, Sher. Good evening, everyone.
And our colleague Christopher Jones will be with us shortly. He is in the green room making sure, like me, he is properly put together. Ms. Finance, how things are on your end?
Well,
And what has your attention?
I'm great. Actually, what have my attention is Mr. Schumann. He has everybody's attention right now on what is considered, I think, the most disgraceful and most barefaced attempt by Schumann to just do whatever it takes to please the PPP. I think Schumann went overboard today, Mr. Duncan, in his attempt to jump as high as the PPP instruct him to jump. He went overboard. It is unforgiven. It's unforgivable. We cannot allow Mr. Schumann to believe that he can just walk around and be happy whilst wearing the cap of the LJP. And I can tell you, I just came off the phone actually with someone in Region 7 in the 𝗵𝗵 area that's expressing such dissatisfaction in Schumann and the fact that they would have listened to him speak about how he's going to be representing the indigenous people, and that is his call to Parliament. And now everyone is seeing quite clearly that he has no interest in the indigenous people of Guyana. The woman even made a comment that they took note that Mr. Schumann was saying all the time that he was so disturbed by the name being changed from the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs to Amerindian Affairs. And then when he was all sucked into the PPP, he said, well, the people got to know what they want to call itself, right? These are the conversations that are being had in the communities of indigenous peoples. Now, Mr. Schumann went the extra mile and he just tightened the rope a little more around his own neck by doing what he did today. You cannot just go out there because someone does not want to represent the PPP and they believed you. The man believed you when you said that you were going to be representing the indigenous people. He came on board with you. He lent support to you. He let you affix his name to your list. You selected this representative to represent the LJP. And now that the man is going forward with his moral compass and saying, well, the APNU AFC have the plurality of the vote and thus they deserve to have the chairmanship of the region, you suddenly decide that this man is not capable of representing the LJP anymore. Well, guess what? The LJP will have no other support moving forward because the LJP is equivalent to the PPP, and that is all. It is most disturbing, sir. That is most disturbing.
Wicked. Chris, welcome. A very good evening, sir.
Good evening, Sherrod. Good evening, Jerito. But to add on the same Schumann note, if I should say that. Listen, Lennox Schumann has passed the stage of being a disgrace. And I say that on many fronts. Essentially, in all of the hostings in this country that you know over the last 23 years under the People's Progressive Party Civic, they use the indigenous people and the indigenous communities as essentially nothing more than a vote cow, in which when it comes around election time, they will go into the various communities and they'll do handouts. They turn them essentially into mendicants, in which they will be able to harness votes out of them. Lennox Schumann presented himself as an indigenous leader. He presented himself to the indigenous community as that person who will bring an end to that sort of mendicancy-ism that the PPP instituted in many of those indigenous communities. He said to the indigenous people across the length and breadth of this country that he's there to represent their interests. But all of us knew, all of us knew that outside of the LJP political party, there were several other small, what we call them? Those small political parties that essentially were out there campaigning as independent political parties, but they're nothing else.
Satellite parties for the PPP.
Exactly. And the JPL political party is exactly that.
You can't even remember the name, Chris, right?
Exactly. what people needs to know, and I don't think a lot of persons see 𝗪𝗵cie in the parliament. 𝗪𝗵cie supposed to be the 32nd opposition member of parliament. And when it comes time to bills, motion, and debate, 𝗪𝗵cie represents the interests of the People's Progressive Party Civic. So when the PPP has 33 members who are to speak on a particular, on the budget or whatever, Schuman makes the 34th person. That's what he does. 𝗪𝗵cie has been appointed in a senior position, of which he received close to $1 million in cash and stipends and so forth from the People's Progressive Party Civic. 𝗪𝗵cie is a staff working with the People's Progressive Party Civic, and it clearly points you to what we said leading into these elections, that all of these small political parties are nothing more than subsets of the PPP. When those indigenous communities thought that 𝗪𝗵cie was there to represent the interests of the indigenous people, 𝗪𝗵cie was there to represent the interests of himself. And now, having achieved his objective of receiving close to $1 million per month with salaries and other benefits, 𝗪𝗵cie has to ensure that the will of the PPP is adhered to. And the objective.
He doesn't have a choice. Schuman has absolutely no choice but to do whatever the PPP says. And this is what people need to understand. He has no will. He has no structure. The party doesn't, the LJP does not exist anymore. And this is what people need to understand. It is a name. He is there by the name of the LJP. 𝗪𝗵cie, he is a representation of the PPP. The LJP was created to do what it did. It served its purpose, and now it is no more. It dissolved. It disappeared after that purpose was fulfilled. A man cannot be paid by the PPP and go against the will of the PPP. It's impossible. When he took the job, he knew it was a conflict of interest, but there was no other interest to him. So it was no conflict in his head. Which other interest was there to conflict with?
Now he's sitting nicely on this Civil Aviation Board, part of this 30 pieces of silver.
Yeah, but you said 30 pieces of silver. I said close to $1 million. And that's what people know about close to $1 million every month Schuman received from the People's Progressive Party Civic. And that's why you have to abide by their will. So when he turns up in the parliament with his loincloth, professing to represent the interests of the indigenous people, he's all about show. He's all about
the length at which, and I have a serious issue with the length of which he was willing to go to deceive people to believe that he actually cared about their interests, when he has absolutely no care whatsoever about the interests of the indigenous people. And all he cares about is himself, and I can say that because he's yet to show me otherwise. I am yet to see otherwise from this man. I'll go further because, Sherry, look, I am so upset right about this matter when I read the news article on his statement, basically. And I can tell you, I was looking, it was blatantly disgraceful, disrespectful to the highest regard to the representative in Region 8 of the LJP. Blatantly disrespectful. And what I remember quite clearly is that the ERC actually had a program in which Schuman was asked to speak on, and he went to the length to speak about the PPP and the PNC and racism and racist politics in Guyana. And I said, look at this hypocrite, somebody that literally on the bandwagon of racism and using race to elevate yourself politically in this country. You literally sit in the National Assembly because you went on race-based votes there. And how dare you speak about people inciting racial division in Guyana at this period in time? You literally only had your candidacy in regions that are dominant with indigenous people. How dare you speak about racial division in Guyana at this point in time? You are a representative of racial division. You are one of the people that caused us to be where we are because you facilitate racial politics in this country.
Exactly.
I'm very upset right now, Sharon.
And even on that issue, even the PPP who he has couched himself among, a real wolf in sheep's clothing does not see him as an honest interlocutor, because there were numerous instances when he should have been chairing Parliament in the absence of the Speaker, and they don't want him at all. They don't want him to touch the Speaker's chair.
He was never put as a deputy speaker to have a function. He was put as a deputy speaker to make sure that there was no deputy speaker.
Yeah.
That's why he was put as a deputy speaker, to make very well sure that there was no representation of that seat.
Exactly. Numerous occasions he should have been offered the opportunity in the absence of the Speaker. They rather not convene Parliament if the Speaker has COVID than put 𝗪𝗵 to chair the proceedings, because they have no intentions and they know that he's not an honest interlocutor in that process.
That's right.
Chris,
they know the man. We know the man.
We all know the man. On the parliamentary note, Chris, I know there's a sitting of Parliament coming up. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. All right. So essentially, on the 28th of January, there is a sitting of the National Assembly, of which essentially it is Private Members' Day, or it is referred to as Opposition Members' Day. That means simply that all of the bills, motion, questions, and so forth that has been put forward by the opposition, those bills and so forth takes precedence in the House in terms of having them debated and so forth. The combined opposition, the APNU AFC, we have 2 motions and 1 bill. A very important bill I'll get to in a short bit. But the 2 motions that is before the House has to do with the recent uprising at the 𝘁𝗧𝗵𝗏 prison, which resulted in the death of, I think, 2 prisoners and multiple injuries to several others. As well, there is a motion on the death of the Henry boys and the 𝗪𝗪cie 𝗵𝗏 youngster there in the 𝗪𝗪cie region. Both motions have been tabled by Shadow Minister for Public Security, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond, and those come up on the 28th. And of course, there is the bill, the narcotics and psychotropic bill that has been tabled by yourself and 𝗪𝗵cie 𝗶𝗴𝗵𝗏. That, in essentially, and I think Cheryl, we should spend a few minutes on that, because essentially put it in layman terms, it has to do with the use of marijuana, and those thousands of people who have been incarcerated for a number of months for just having a spliff or a shoelace or a 𝗪𝗪cie, as the streets would refer to those as. And you see that those persons were incarcerated for 3, 5, and 6 months respectively, in which they are housed in a facility with hardcore criminals. You go in, they go into the prison system for having a spliff or a 𝗪𝗪cie or a shoelace and come out as a hardcore criminal. So the bill that is proposed seeks to reduce or rather increase the amount that a person could be caught in his or her person on them and not have to spend prison time. As well too, it speaks about, rather than having those persons incarcerated in the prison system, that they do community service and so forth, which is had in any other jurisdiction and so forth. It is just only Guyana and a few other Caribbean territories that are still in the arcade setting as it relates to that. But Sharon, as I said, it's an important bill having tabled by yourself, and perhaps you could go a bit more in depth as it relates to that.
I only added at this time that I saw several churches in Grenada currently having a discussion on the very study that was done by CARICOM on marijuana use in the region. As you know, CARICOM spearheaded a very comprehensive piece of research and work in this area.
Yeah.
And it is the view of CARICOM that some of the old antiquated laws which you outlined have incarcerated people for very, very small amounts of marijuana possession should be outlawed now and should be struck off of the books. And that is part of the aim of this legislation. And I want to add to the parliamentary update, Chris, the fact that parliamentarians have not been really and truly officially trained by Parliament, even though the clerk of the National Assembly has told us that he is set and ready to go with where his training is concerned.
Yeah,
Any thoughts there?
Sure.
Trish, I think Chris has some challenges, so jump in if you want to. Go right ahead.
What I can say is that the Parliament of Guyana is the only parliament in the Commonwealth that has not had training for parliamentarians after they were sworn in. Every other parliament throughout the Commonwealth, the system that we follow and that we're part of, every other parliament had training for their MPs after they were sworn. This is the only parliament with an exception. But of course, we have an exception because we're exceptional. We have the PVP to deal with. This is an exceptional matter.
Correct.
I think Chris is back now.
And sorry about that. But in fact, indeed, because our parliamentarians were slated to have their training done.
I think we have lost Chris now, but I am in agreement with 𝗪𝗓 that it's the only parliament thus far, since the election of the MPs officially and the swearing of MPs to parliament, who have not had a chance to be properly trained by the institution, as is a normal procedure when new parliamentarians, especially, are sworn in to parliament. I think we have Chris back with us.
Yeah,
right
my
ahead.
apologies. The weather. Yeah, so we were slated. The parliamentarians were slated to have their training done in the first week in the month of December, and in fact, we had actually put aside an overtraining, which would have been done in the UK Parliament to facilitate the training of the parliamentarians in Guyana. Strangely enough, that training never came off, and to date, that has not had. Now, having served in the 10th Parliament, I can tell you within a few days of us taking the oath, literally in 3 days, all of the new parliamentarians, we were subjected to the training. So you get that sort of guidance in terms of the rules, the function of the National Assembly, and so forth. It is critical and important. Training of any sort is important, and particularly as new parliamentarian, as new legislators.
This is now 6 months later.
Yeah. Correct. I mean, subject to correction, I think it's probably now unprecedented that a new parliament in Guyana, that the new parliamentarians, after 6 months, have not been trained. Mind you, this has nothing to do with the pandemic, because this could either be done virtually or the space within that we use at the Arthur Chung Conference Center. It has sufficient space, has sufficient spaces between us as the 65 members, and noting it is only approximately 47 members who are new that would require that training. It is the weirdest thing. It is a strange.
It's wickedness on the part of the PVPC. Moving on, folks, I know there was a recent trip to Cameroon by opposition MPs led by the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Joseph Harman. And I note that after that trip, I don't know what ants nest you all raise up there, but suddenly there's a flurry of activities and of articles on the Cameroon and the work they're claiming to be doing there. Thoughts, MPs?
Yeah. 𝗪𝗓, you want to go first?
Well, actually, I'm not surprised that all of those activities started after, because what you would have acknowledged, everyone would have acknowledged, is that before that trip by the MPs of the opposition, there was no activity there. The persons were completely neglected. Persons were calling for help, begging for help, and there was no help given by the government. So now that they feel that they are embarrassed, that the opposition that they make sure have absolutely no power and resources in those areas to do much, could actually do all that we could have done on that trip, of course, they're going to start doing whatever they need to have done, whatever they think they can salvage and put together some of the pieces that they can find.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just walk us through some of what the trip entailed, MP Jones.
All right. So essentially, I must make this point first. The APNU AFC, the 31 members of parliament, must be commended because essentially their that one-off $25,000 bonus, as well as the COVID $25,000 relief, which with the correction, which I think only two FPs based on their location have received that actual 25,000. So all of the 31 members of parliament have committed their $25,000 one-off bonus and the $25,000 COVID relief fund. We stopped those monies and were able to purchase the goods and support to put together hampers. We visited the 3 NDCs in the Cameroon River. Mind you, those 3 NDCs were established under the APNA administration. It speaks about 𝗪𝗵cie, it speaks about Phoenix, it speaks about Kitty Providence, and all 3 of those NDCs, the residents there who are suffering as a result of flood, all receive those hampers. The residents there were able to put together the list of those persons who are suffering, and based on that list, the names were called out and persons were able to collect, and those who were absent, the neighbors were able to collect on their behalf and take that to them too. The general secretary.
So Chris, you all didn't check to see who is a household, who who owned the property, how much beds they got, and so on?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. All we needed to know is that they are a resident of one of those NDCs mentioned, and they would have received a package because of the flooding. In some cases, you had a family of which the husband, his sister, his adult son, who happens to be a father, and so forth. All of them receive, even though they are within one house and space and so forth. It wasn't an issue in terms of who owns the property and all of that nonsense, but essentially they are Guyanese who are suffering as a result of the flooding, and all of them receive those hampers as well. I was mentioning to General Secretary of the PNC, 𝗪𝗵cie, participated in the event too, because whereas the funding that was supplied by all of the members of parliament was not sufficient, some resources were able to be garnered from the PNC and put together in that package as well.
Fantastic.
Sherrod, I mean, Jarita mentioned the fact that in terms of having the presence of the CDC, the RDC, in the community to lend assistance to these residents. Mind you, this flooding started sometime in late October and it ran all the way into December. And anyone who knows the Cameroon River, the people there depend on farming. That is their main income. That is the main source of income. I take you back to 2013, then opposite, they visited same community, and you had the farmers who essentially the talent they have, in which they have to pay more than $1,000 per child to get the out of the river to charity to go to school. And David Granger at that point in time had said to those residents there, if I become president, I commit to you that the first thing I will put here is a school boat to take the children to school. And that's why I said to people is that is where the David G school boat was birthed, in that same lower Cameroon River in a village in the village of 𝗪𝗪cie. That is where the young person spoke about. So person who know that area, they know that every time there is persistent rainfall, the land it becomes inundated with floodwaters as a result of the mouth of the Cameroon River not being dredged consistently. You had under the APNU AFC government, there was dredging done multiple years during our period there. Since after the 𝗪𝗪cie election, there was no dredging that was done, and of course, as a result of that, you have flooding to that area. They have lost all of their crops. So, and you know, it takes a while before the land gets back to a point in which you could actually plant on it. So those farmers there will need assistance for, say, the next 3 months before they can get back on their feet. So it is not the end. It has to be a continued process.
Fantastic. And again, I am equally overjoyed that those folks got that very necessary help, and that it took the opposition to go there to bring relief to the people, and now the government has gone scampering. They are not leading. They are following in every regard, and we only have to look at the management of COVID to know that this government is not leading. They are following. Final thoughts, Julia, as we come to program time.
Um, I see we lost Chris again. Yeah, sure. And you asked Chris just now, if they were looking at who owned the household and all those things, and I was just thinking that when you are set out to help people and to help poor people that are desperately in need of that help, those are criteria that you do not incorporate it into your action plan. You do not do that because it's going to hamper you from actually giving the people that actually need help real help. And we've been speaking about it as in comparison to the COVID cash grant that the government is giving out, and they are putting a whole set of requirements that people that are desperately in need of money really can't meet. And every single day, Sherrod, persons go into representatives of the coalition throughout the country, airing their concerns, some of them in tears about the treatment they have received from the persons that are distributing the cash grant, but basically do not want, some of them don't even want to listen to their story as to why they can provide documentation for a property. Single mothers at home, they do not have, they did not receive the cash grant because they did not have any proof that they own the property. And these are the things that persons are facing because, shared, as we all know, the people don't care about poor people. People was never a government that cared anything about poor people. They didn't care then, they're not about to start caring now.
Exactly.
Correct. Closing thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, but in fact, well, rather than a closing thought, it's just an update as it relates. Since yesterday, Sherrod, we have been following the situation at the National Communications Network and there at DPI as it relates to staffers who have been tested positive for COVID-19. As at last night, we had a total of 29 persons at DPI, or which represents 30% of the staffers at DPI have tested positive for COVID-19.
How is that?
Yeah, as at this evening, we have confirmed that 3 staff members this afternoon received their results and they have tested positive. So that now brings the total amount of persons from the Department of Public Information tested positive for COVID-19 to 32 persons. So that would be about 31% of the staff population. NCN, as we note, and DPI are within the same complex, the same building. It's just the floors that separate them, but there is intermingling amongst the staffers. As we said, as of yesterday, they were trying to keep this on the wraps, keeping it hush-hush, but it's until we exposed it, then we saw movement. I can tell you that at the level of NCN, they have taken some measures to safeguard their personnel there. They have now moved to have some of the staff work remotely and some persons on a rotation system. They have been spraying and sanitizing of the NCN space. However, at DPI, which is the hot spot for the COVID-19, Minister Frank Anthony, 𝗪𝗵𝗴, and Edward Lane have instructed the doctors that they must present the COVID results to them first, and they will then in turn present that to them. That in itself too is a clear patient-doctor violation. Earlier today, we had Karen come in who came and reiterated that point in terms of the oath that was taken by doctors, that in terms of the patient, in terms of that result, even in death, even if a patient dies, that doctor, that oath restricts him or her from revealing their status. So that is a clear violation. And I remind you now, Sherrod, that is exactly what happened to the staffers of the Parliament when that first fake COVID positive case went about in the Parliament. It was the same situation with the staffers there. Today, at NCN and DPI, there was a clear absence of the senior staffers. The senior staffers were not seen.
They're
Such persons as, Edward Lane, 𝗁𝗵𝗴 never turned up there. Nia Suban was absent. Senior human resource managers were absent. Senior staffers at DPI and NCN for some strange reason today were absent. The question the staffers are asking, correct. So the question that staffers are asking, whether or not they have been tested positive and has decided to go into isolation, or is it a case that they are isolating themselves for safety, but at the same time, they have instructed the staff that they must turn out to work, and failure to turn out to work will result in the termination of their duties. We spoke about the numerous amount of outreach exercise across the country in which DPI I can report to you now that tomorrow, Minister Joseph Hamilton is expected to go to the mining town of Linden, and already identified DPI staffers, cameramen, reporters, and so forth who have to accompany him. Those staffers, they don't know their status. They don't know the status of the minister. But for those folks in the mining town of Linden, tomorrow Joseph Hamilton is coming to you to speak and bring out sled. We warn you.
They should check them out.
Exactly, that him and as well the staffers, unfortunately the staffers at DPI and NCN would rather stay home, but they are being forced to go up there. So they have no choice, but we ask you to exercise take the necessary precaution.
Yeah, and to add to what Chris just said, Sure, really quick, is that what one of the procedure is that they were trying to do is that when someone got tested, they asked some persons to stay home until they get their results. Because obviously, if you were tested and the test was done at DPI, it was mass testing. Everyone was tested because obviously someone there was exposed to COVID. That's why that was done. And the test was done, I think, on Monday. And persons were not asked to stay home in quarantine. They were just there performing their normal duties. So when the tests started coming in, persons were literally on duty while they were receiving a phone call to say, well, I am positive. And anyone that knows the physical layout of DPI would know that once one staff contracts COVID, everyone is at risk because they are all together, they're working together, and the various departments are so interlinked. Persons have to be interacting face to face with each other. This is very dangerous. And what I can say, I feel really bad for the fact that the staff had to go through that. I'm glad that we were able to bring some recognition to that situation. And I wish all those staff speedy recovery, because I know that they are being forced to do what they have to do just to be paid at the end of the month. So we hope that you all recover fully and that you are able to go out there and to do your job, because this is a situation in which sure, we have hardworking persons at DPI, NCN, and all of these places, persons that go to work and try to be as professional as they could. And we have political leaders in those organizations that does not give a damn about their health, putting them at risk on a daily basis. And that's the fact.
Correct. Great. Folks, we have to leave it there for this evening. Member of Parliament, 𝗁𝗵𝗴 Finance, Member of Parliament, Christopher Jones. Chris is also the opposition chief whip. Thanks for joining us this evening, bringing us up to date with what's happening with Parliament, what's happening with that vital training, what's happening in the Cameroon, and also touching on this COVID outbreak. You know, it's difficult even to say that a COVID outbreak at NCN, DPI. And just to hear you say that there's a hotspot, kind of made me feel really, really bad. Folks, our thoughts and prayers are with the staff of NCN and DPI. We hope that you guys are getting the best care possible. Thanks, folks, for joining. And as we go, we always admonish you guys to make sure that you are social distancing, wearing your mask, sanitizing, and practicing all of the other protocols that are in place for your health and your safety. And as we go, we say tonight, continue to do exactly that. A good night to all, except Mr. Lennox Shu-das. It's no longer Schumann. He's the other Judas. It's Shu-das. Have a great evening, folks. See you tomorrow.